Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our weekly Improving Talks. This month's theme has been leadership, and today we will continue with this series with our very own guest of honor, Daniel Scheifler. Daniel is a principal consultant with experience in e-commerce, telemedicine, and oil and gas. As an electrical engineer turned software development leader, he prides himself on highly disciplined development, leading to more effective products and processes. He is also a problem solver at heart and leverages this strength in applying industrial theory to the challenges of software development. When not engaged in coding, you'll find him playing with his 5 children, reading or tinkering, whether in the woodshop or in a computer. I'm thrilled to welcome him today with his aptly titled talk, The Necessary Discipline of Leaders. As you know, leaders today are faced with an ever-growing list of challenges. Not only do they need to respond quickly to business changes, but they must also create stable, productive work cultures at the same time. Today, Daniel will illustrate the principles that allow leaders and their organizations to thrive with both. But before we start, remember that we have a Q&A feature that I encourage you to use so you can ask him questions at any time. And without further ado, I leave you with Daniel Scheifler as he takes us on this journey to learn more about what it takes to be a successful leader. The microphone is all yours, Daniel. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Armando. Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Necessary Discipline of Leaders. And as he's already done an eloquent job of introducing me, I'm going to skip over part of that because the most important piece here is that I have dedicated the last half of my career to software engineering leadership. That is studying, practicing, and coaching in leadership especially, and in the software engineering space. And in that time, I've had enough experience now to see the truth in a statement, a quote from John Maxwell, a well-known leadership developer. And that is that everything rises and falls on leadership. It is an area that we really struggle in. Jumping into managing or leading a team is more like a career change. But it's not uncommon then to see a senior software engineer who's just become team lead begin to struggle immediately in their new position. And let's be honest, the demands placed on them by their organization only seem to mount, and there's very little help for them. But don't just take my word for the fact that engineering leadership is far too vital for us just to hope it gets right. Rather, both Gallup and the Global Leadership Forecast have the data to back this up. You see, poor leadership choices, just the choices of bad strategy, of failure to follow up, of poor management, are costing annually $630 million with an M dollars, period. But it doesn't just affect the leaders, does it? Because being leaders, we immediately have teams that depend on us, and the choices of bad leaders hit them too. In fact, an employee is 3.5 times more likely to leave a leader who lacks interpersonal skills, read people skills, right? We've got technical leaders being promoted who have never had the chance nor the coaching to know how to effectively interact with others, how to effectively solve problems that stretch beyond the standard organizational boundaries. And as though that weren't enough, only 1 in 4, like 23% of employees are willing to say that they trust their leaders to make the right choice. That is horrible. Now, here at Improving, we believe that trust changes everything, but it also enables a form of organizational agility that is simply not possible if there's not mutual trust and respect going both up the chain and down. But at 1 in 4 employees saying, yeah, I don't trust my leader, that leaves 3 of them who are a little cautious on this. And in fact, the problem gets bigger from there because this lack of trust, this disenfranchisement that comes with feeling you can't really trust the people over you to take care of you, leads to 6 in 10 employees feeling disengaged in their work through micromanagement or loss of motivation or any of that. But that disengagement creates a massive global scale problem of 8.8 trillion with a T lost GDP globally in 2023 from disengaged, ineffective workers, all stemming from leaders who aren't as effective as they need to be and know they're not. But as if that weren't enough fuel on the fire, let's talk about how fast we have to have these people changing now. Now, for some scale, let me tell a little bit of story, right? Back in the 1760s, we had the first industrial revolution out in Britain. This was water-powered giant water wheels, motion looms, right? This was the first moment the textile industry started to automate. But it took us 150 years until about 1908 for what we understand as industrialization and mass manufacturing really to come to fruition, with the first Model T rolling off the line. Thank you, Ford. Jump another 70, 60 odd years, and a couple of world wars, unfortunately, and we start seeing the emergence of computers as we really understand them today, with the invention of the C language. No longer are we writing simple byte code and assembly. We're now writing a language where there's a degree of abstraction from how the memory is moving to what we're trying to solve as the problem. Jump forward about 20 years, and the birth of the World Wide Web. Yes, we started seeing the internet as we understand it. Now, it would take another decade-ish for it to really invade our homes and change how we did everything, but Cyber Monday, and frankly, even working remotely, only became possible in the way we know it today because of the World Wide Web. Jump forward 20, 30 years, and you get now, work remote's no longer an option for most of us. It becomes absolutely required because COVID-19 shuttered tons of businesses. Now, all of the leaders who had learned how to manage and lead in a world pre-internet are now having to, frankly, hold the bag while we figure out how do we lead with only the internet. 100% work was the reality for a lot of us, and many businesses just couldn't pivot fast enough. We had scads of them closing, and many of us like this word pivot, because we all had to learn very quickly a new way of working, how to translate all in-person events to now fully virtual events, and how to deal with the fact of, hey, we're living at home, so now my kids might run into my office and interrupt a meeting. Sorry, guys. 2 years later, are you noticing a pattern of shrinking time between major shifts in how we work? 2 years later, COVID's not so much a big deal. We got a vaccine. Hey, brah. But now we're getting mandates for a return to office. No. Y'all can't do this possibly perfectly at home. Y'all got to get back in here. And that, of course, spawned the Great Resignation and a whole lot of churn in the industries, because it's hard to keep good people who don't want to have to go back to the old ways of working because the new ones worked. And as if that weren't enough change to deal with it in just 2 years, at the tail end of that year, ChatGPT launched in November of 2022. Generative AI barges into the scene, and 2023 has seen a raft of new things. And we've had to deal with all of them. The pace of change for leaders is faster than it has ever been before and shows zero sign of slowing down. And it is in ways which will fundamentally alter how we will work in the future. Not small changes, but complete game changers in this industry. And we've got a growing realization of it. But the data backs this up. We've got to learn to change and pivot on what is important faster than ever before. But with all of those statistics and all of that story, the only way to make this talk today useful is if it's useful to you, the people who are attending and have chosen to spend your time with me. Thank you for that. But I want to make certain you walk away today with what you're most keen to have. So I want to take a few, please use the Q&A feature and send to myself and Armando the kind of things you're most interested in walking away with, so I can make a point to try and incorporate them in the points I've already got to talk about. And if it's not there, I can add it. And Armando, I'm going to ask you, if you'd be so kind, sir, monitor the chat, and as stuff comes in, send it on back to me.
You got it, Daniel. I have one here that says, in your personal opinion, what are the main 5 ingredients of a great leader? If you can walk us through that during your presentation.
5 ingredients for a great leader, okay? Well, I think I can definitely answer some of that, though I think there are perhaps fewer ingredients, but I'm going to try and do a little bit of a distillation here. I'm definitely going to be able to cover that today.
Okay, so Claudio La Sala, hi, says, I'm always interested in new perspectives on leadership.
Okay, new perspectives. Then I'll do my best to present not only my perspective, but also where that's coming from. One of the very common questions that I've heard before has been how do I identify the changes I actually need to make before they're forced on me? Especially with all the history that we've seen of time slowly crunching in on us, and we've got months between changes where we used to have decades or years. How do we catch up, as it were, with the changes? And I'll definitely be covering some of that, though much of that will have to be developed as a personal system in the future. Also, key in on that word, system, will be a favorite title today. All right, we'll give it just one more minute here. If there are any other particular takeaways you'd like to walk away from, then we'll go from there. Otherwise, I thank you very much for the trust that I'm going to present something that is value added to. How to craft a good vision and strategy to follow through. I like that one. Definitely can add to that. There will be several places in this talk where I'll kind of harken back to that. ID, good vision, and follow through. In case you're wondering, yes, I literally am writing these down so I can have them ready for me while I help make this talk useful to you. All right. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, let us begin. Now, I like to begin things in a very specific manner. If we're going to talk about leadership, that means we're going to have to talk about who the leaders serve. Because if we're going to define effective leadership, we have to define it being effective for the people who are leadership's customers, as it were. And with that in mind, I'll offer the following. How many of you would say something like this about a boss you've had in the past? People don't quit jobs, they quit bad bosses. Now, that phrase is very well known. It's a favorite fact to quote from the press. And yes, people leave bad bosses, but that is by no means the whole story, right? After all, if it were just the bad bosses, people would automatically filter against bad bosses and would leave. There's always a little more to it than that. And every leader knows it's not just the boss who's a bad boss, because we're all constrained by the system that we're in, right? I can't do certain things because the organization's policies literally prohibit me from doing so. But who's in the position to change those policies? Oh, right, a leader. Now, it may not be you. And to be fair, we understand that some of the things that you're trying to do are going to be beyond your direct influence. But with only 23% of employees saying they can trust their leaders, we got to be able to put our money where our mouth is, because otherwise it's no wonder they don't trust us and we can't influence where we need to go. This is horrendous. Employees want a leader worth following. Now, I use that word worth very intentionally. Every one of us would love to be able to state, I worked for an awesome leader. And I'll bet you most of us have at least one person in mind of what that was like. And we all want to be able to work with or under that person again because we trusted them. We trusted that they had our back, that when push came to shove, the stuff they were telling us in the meeting was important would actually be important, that they would back it up. We want that in our leaders because it is a way for us to be confident. Not only am I going to be producing high value, I personally will be safe. But let's talk about that word, that key word there, trust. How do we come to trust people? How do we come to trust someone who's a leader? Well, thinking about it, just how do I come to trust a friend? It's, do they keep their word? When push comes to shove, when it's hard, do they still do what they promised to do? And this becomes a real big challenge for leaders because, in a sense, they don't hold the soldering iron anymore, right? A leader, in the sense of being like a manager, isn't supposed to be doing the day-to-day work for their team. Now, to support this, I want to take you guys to a model that comes out of the book, Wiring the Winning Organization. It is the 3 layers of work. Now, layer 1 is the work itself, right? This would be the software engineer actually writing the code to solve the business problem, the work. Or it might be the person over in the accounting department using that software to actually perform the accounting operation. But the work itself is the outcomes, or is directly tied to the outcomes, that the business is actually interested in. It's what will cause the business to trust the team and the leader over that team, that they are actually capable. But since leaders aren't doing the work themselves, there's this genuine question. How then would they demonstrate actions of being trustworthy? After all, they can't or shouldn't be just doing the work. And if they were, we wouldn't be calling them a leader. We'd be calling them a senior contributor. Instead, the results have to emerge for a leader from some other source. And I'm going to key you in on a word here. It emerges from the socio-technical system that they are stewarding and creating. Now, when I say socio-technical system, let's kind of flesh that out, right? Because I mentioned there are 3 layers of work, and we talked about one, which is the work itself. What else is there? Well, layer 2 is the maintenance of the tools, of the processes of the work. It's how work flows into the system and then flows back out. And it's the ability to actually execute the work itself that gets monitored and the logistical support. But this also isn't the work that the leader is doing. They're definitely aware of it and likely have done it in the past. This is the selection of the right tools. This is the operation of the tools and keeping them up to date. Think if I'm using GitHub as my CI/CD backbone, this work is the making certain the right people have access, that the right repositories are involved, and that the right computers, literally, are talking to the GitHub runners. This, again, isn't where leaders are working. Rather, this is going to be a maintenance type work, which is important for the organization, but usually is handed off to a platform team. No, the real action by leaders happens at this 3rd layer. This is the social circuitry element. The how do we know that we need to maintain? How do the people who are maintaining know that they're maintaining the right thing? How does the group who's doing the work get feedback on whether that thing that they just released is of high quality or not? And critically, if we have a quality problem, how do I work that back to reform the process so it never happens again? How do I build the people in that process so that not only do they know the work, they know how to do it excellently and can detect bugs before it gets out into production? This is the social circuitry layer. And that guy right there, circled in red with the arrow, him, that is the work of a leader. Working to identify what are the flows of information in this system, what are the actors in this system, what do they need, and when do they need it, so that they can act on it. This is the role that a leader really plays in the organization, because they're the only ones who have been able to step back far enough from the work itself to see it. So when we were talking about what does it take to be an effective leader, you need to build effective socio-technical systems. And that's a whole bunch of academic speak. Let's take that to normal speak. You need to build effective team systems. Now, this systems word, that noun, is going to become incredibly important for this talk. And so I'm going to get you into a discipline that I don't have time to go into here, but you really should check out to really make the most out of this talk, and that is systems thinking. Because the leader is working on the socio-technical system, the team of teams that is your organization. How does your team interact with each other? How does your team interact with another team? How do your teams in your department interact with other departments? And making certain that the flow of information, the flow of value, is clear, obvious, and consistent. Because the effective leader, even though they don't hold the soldering iron, they are not doing the day-to-day work as much. They build the systems that produce the work and keep it high quality and enable the people in the system to do their best work. But how do we do that? Because again, that's this system, that's out here. But you said trust was going to be based upon in here, on my actions. And you're right. That first element that I then need to introduce you to is the first of 3 really big keys for effective leadership. Number 1, an effective leader is accountable. Out of extreme leadership, Jocko Willink and Leif Babin introduced concepts from leading SEALs teams with stories from the military of how it applied, and then the same, but in a context. And one of the quotes that they have throughout the book is that there are no bad teams, only bad leaders. And that is advocating an extreme form of accountability, which I admit, it really resonates with me, but it is terrifying. Because that means that if the team I am leading isn't performing as well as it could, it's not their fault. It's mine. I use that word fault intentionally here. Because it is accepting that if I'm going to truly lead in a way that will inspire others to follow and have the impact it needs to, I need to be accountable for stuff that did not result from my own behaviors. And it's hard to swallow some days, because it means that when your team, person A and person B, Alice and Bob, they're not playing nice together. Yeah, that's an Alice and Bob problem. But as a leader, It's your responsibility. You need to take responsibility to go and work on it. It's on you. When your team falls into pointing and shaming and blaming, that's on you. But there's something else with that. Because what you model to your team will start echoing. Do you model accepting humbly that you could have led them better? And that we need to work on our interactions because the way you're interacting with the team is allowing them to do this? That we need to own it personally? If you model that form of leadership, what are they going to echo back? But you can only start with what you affect. Now, that means effectively.
Daniel,
Hey, Armando, what's up?
An interesting question from the audience that says, how to ensure my team stays on top of things without turning into a micromanager? That's a good one.
So I can't answer that entirely on this slide, but I will get to it. Here's how I would, right? When we talk about staying on top of things, we're trying to say, hey, there's important work to be done. And they are not treating it with the level of importance that you believe it should have. And you got kind of two choices in the response. You can humbly understand that something is a gap in the system. And the system is responsibility. So I need to come in and figure out what actually happened, right? It might feel obvious to me, these guys don't know what they're doing, so I should train them. Or it might feel obvious that these guys just don't care. Neither of those narratives has been substantiated yet. As a leader, to accept accountability, the system has not performed what it ought to. Okay, why? As a leader, your job is then to go and investigate and find that out. And so the first step for how do I keep my team on top of their stuff is, why aren't they already? Do they know what being on top of it means? Did they know that was their stuff? There's a ton of questions you should start asking there and accept that I don't know yet. Go find out the real thing, not just what they say. Follow it up, because maybe it's that they don't think it's important because it's never had consequences for not getting done before. Or the way that they're paying for those consequences right now doesn't hurt enough. But when you remember that you're leading people, you're having to own results, even from a team that you didn't start, that you didn't create, whatever they're doing now, the moment you becoming their leader, it became your responsibility. And if you choose to say, well, it's their fault, they know what's going to happen. They know anything that rolls down as a problem, you're not going to get in the way of it for them. They're going to have to hold it. And so they're going to keep their heads down and make certain that none of the problems come out of them. You will create a culture of, CYA. Instead, if you own the results and say, you're right, we're not performing as well as we should be. Here are the steps we're taking to try and fix that. Thank you for letting us know, right? If you engage like that, oh, hey, he's actually going to go to bat for me. That's fantastic. And now you've taken the step to start building trust. If there's a dysfunction on your team, take responsibility. It probably isn't your behavior, or it might be. Find out what the real answer is, but take personal responsibility for working to fix it. Sometimes that fix does mean you don't like working on this team, and that's okay. But it means that you don't want to be on this team, and so we're going to find you another place, a place where you'll be more fruitful. It might mean that, hey, the way we're doing it doesn't work, right? We have a conflict constantly because one of us is louder than the other. And that means we need to change having a meeting because the best ideas aren't flowing. Instead, it's just the loudest. What do you value and how do you act? I'm going to boil it down to like this. Leadership is about your character. Will you humbly accept responsibility for stuff that you didn't build, you didn't create, and steward it towards something new? Or are we going to stick with arrogance of, well, this is not my way, so that's not what we're doing? Leadership, effectively, requires a humble approach. It is about your character, and your team will sniff it out a mile away. So expect that you're going to have to accept the blame for stuff, even the stuff you didn't create, and for the challenge that your team is going to face. But equally, expect to come giving credit when it comes time, right? Because at the end of the day, when your team achieves the goal of the organization, which is great, good job, by the way, you're not the one who did the work, right? Leaders didn't do the layer one work. They never do, or at least they should stop doing it if they are. Because their goal is to enable, to teach, to train, to build a system and a team capable of delivering the results at the scale the organization desires. And at the end of the day, when that happens, it wasn't our job, our hands that built it. It was theirs. And so we need to step out of the way and brag about them to our boss when they say, good job. Right? Can you imagine what that would do? Hey, I've got this boss and he's coming, he's giving praise to me. That's great. But when his boss came and praised him, my boss got out of the way and said, you should go give that to Daniel because he's the one who made it happen. Holy cow! My motivation just jumped through the roof. Right? Because leaders aren't the ones doing the work and they need to recognize that and humbly pass along the praise to the people who really did it in a meaningful fashion. There are no bad teams, only bad leaders. Now, there's a challenge for us to take accountability for stuff that maybe we didn't create, maybe we didn't even start, but it is our job to go make happen. Now, I'm going to offer another challenge on this, right? Because we talked about this trust, but hey, that's supposed to be based on my personal actions, but as a leader, I'm supposed to be affecting the team. How does this work? An effective leader has to be personally effective. Okay. Now there's an intentional tension here, right? Because it's not going to be about your individual contribution, but you still must be personally effective. What does that mean? Well, personal effectiveness, how good are you at leading you? Well, what do you mean leading me? Well, when you say you're going to do a thing, can your team trust that you will? That you will actually take the individual actions to go and have the conversation or resolve a block. This is a challenge that I'm trying to get our head around. When I say you have to be personally effective as a leader, I don't mean you have to be able to do their job better than they do, though that is helpful. Rather, are you able to be self-disciplined enough to change what you're doing? Are you learning? Are you getting better? Are you personally able to affect change outside of you by your own action? Can you change you by a decision? Now I'm going to introduce a model here that I think helps us think through this. And it's from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. In it, he introduces 2 concepts, the sphere of your influence and the sphere of your concerns. Everyone's got 2 of them. And I guarantee you, the sphere of your concerns is almost always going to be bigger than the sphere of your influence. But there's a trick with that. The one you focus on. So if I spend all of my time staring at my feet and saying, well, I can't do it, I can't help it, the organization won't let us, I'm focusing on the sphere of my concerns. And that's what will grow. And the sphere of my influence will diminish. But if I'm focusing on, yes, that team over there has this process that's really frustrating for us to deal with, what can we do to make it less disruptive? Do we reserve capacity? Do we make a buffer? Do we make certain that we renegotiate with them so they never expect us just to jump on this thing and do the thing fast? What do we do? What can we do? Is focusing on the sphere of my influence. Not necessarily of my control, but of what I can influence. Can I help the outcome to be better? And when you are working, I want you thinking on this. Where do you do your work? Are you trying to work on your concerns or on the things you can actually influence? Because what you work on grows. And if what you're working on isn't the thing that's going to produce your change, of course you're going to struggle. Now, where you focus is important, but how do you keep your focus there? This one, I think, plays into that. How do I get this vision and build the follow through? Now, I can't talk to you about how do you build a compelling vision for you, though I can definitely say, go read the 7 Habits. It will help you build one. But for your follow through, what's your daily system that helps you be personally effective so that you can see and keep it top of mind? Something as simple as having your daily planner literally put in front of you, I will work on blah. That's usually enough to keep you, oh, right, I'm supposed to be on that. But go back and review it frequently, right? Keep your focus intentionally, however you need to, but keep your focus intentionally on what can I influence. Yes, I can't change our budget cycle. Yes, I can't change my boss, but I can influence. I can't change my peer, but I can influence. If you will take extreme ownership of your own actions, of your own outcomes, and ask, have I done everything I personally could to influence this Have I done all the work I could? You'll find a ton of things you can do that will lead you in a better fashion. Bluntly, personal effectiveness is how effective can you be at leading you? And this, where you keep your focus, is the first step. Do you have a process? What's your way of working? Can you keep your way of working honed in on the important? Can you keep it honed in on what I can do? And remember that we can't afford to model as leaders any behavior we don't want our team echoing. If I spend my time navel gazing and staring at my boots saying, well, I can't help it, what do you think they're going to do when something goes wrong? Well, I couldn't help it. If we want them to step up and be as effective and awesome as we know they can be, we need to model for them what that looks like. And it will take time. But if you can change how you think and how you act, you can help them see a better pattern. How many times have you been in a room where you walk in and there's this one guy who always asks this one question? Maybe it's a specific architecture question because we burned real bad by it last time. But everyone in the room knows he's going to ask the question. They start coming prepared with answers, don't they? What if, as a leader, you started helping to ask the strategic questions? Hey, how will we know this was you? What would we need to see? Eventually, your team starts getting it in their head. It becomes a little monotonous to them. But by the time the team can quote it back to you when you're about to say it, they've finally learned. And I'll guarantee you, they'll start coming up with answers for it so that they don't have to be asked again. Because it's not fun to be asked to think of it on the spot. But this is how you affect change. You model it to them. You ask it aloud. You involve them in thinking challenges that are really important. But that starts with, can you keep yourself where you need to go? And so I'll leave you with this. Where is your system headed? And does that match your goal? Are you working on the things of your influence and growing that to match the problems that you have today? Or are you focusing on the stuff you can't control and therefore unintentionally diminishing what you can influence? There's a quote here from Deming that I think is very useful. And that is, remember that whatever system exists, the system exists is perfectly tuned to get the results that it does. Which means that our results aren't emerging from a vacuum, nor even from the special headspace that we've been in to be personally effective, because none of us exists on our own. No man's the island, right? Our results are, of course, going to be created through our team and through the organization and the culture that we have there. But so too is our team's organization, and even our organization's results are all manifest from the system we have. And it is perfectly tuned to get those results. And so if we want different results, we need a different system. And so it is going to come out in that next step, because your personal effectiveness comes out of your system. But before we leave there, right? Remember, what you focus on grows. So focus on what you can influence. Always be on the forward, not the back foot. Always aim for what can I influence. Don't accept the passive role. Be active. It starts with what you focus on, which changes your mood. And from there, it changes the actions that you'll spend your time on. And there is only one way. It's the way of discipline to get better at this. Now, I've talked about systems on and on and on and on and on, but let's take a pause. Right? Because yes, an effective leader will create effective systems, but let's talk more important. Because if I just say system a number of times, no special juju is going to make that make sense. Rather, let's start with goals, right? Goals, results, these are the things. I'll bet you that every one of us today would agree with the overall evaluation of the goal. We talked about these goals. Let's talk about the leader's goals. We would love our people to know what work needs to get done. We would love if they knew they had the tools to do it, and literally had the tools to do it. And especially, we would love if our people would voluntarily do the work excellently. Not just minimum bar, but awesome. That is everyone's goal. I'll bet you away. If you strip away all the flowery wording, anything industry specific, every single goal boils down to, let's make people know what they need to do, give them the tools to do it, and then pray they voluntarily do it excellently, and encourage them to do that. Now, real key in this mix is, of course, that last Because if we don't get voluntary excellence, it's just gonna grind. But why does voluntary excellence matter so much? Because, especially in a knowledge working era, what needs to be done, we have a concept of it. But it develops as we actually practice, and we need the people on the ground engaged with it to really get it done. But, if I summarize all of this, it's want to build effective team systems. And effective, we mean affecting the outcomes of the organization, right? It all comes down to, can I build an effective team system? That is every leader's goal at some scale or scope. The CEO wants to build an effective organization system. The Department of Finance wants to build an effective finance system. The systems of work, the supporting processes, and the social connections to make that actually work. That's what we're talking about. But here's the trick. And I'm going to borrow a quote here from James Clear of Atomic Habits. You don't rise to the level of your goals. Because after all, if that's everyone's goals, why wouldn't the economy be booming constantly? And it's because we don't rise to the level of our goals. You will fall to the level of the system you have. Going back to Deming, right? The system that exists is perfectly constructed to get the results it does. So if you want different results, you can't just wish them into being. And you can't just change a player because he's not responsible for the whole of the results. Certainly he contributes to them. You have to go back to the effectiveness system. What keeps you effective? What keeps the organization effective? How does the information about what is needed flow? Now, his book, Atomic Habits, talks about what it takes to personally change our behavioral responses to external stimuli so that we can build the life we want. His patterns also apply in the workplace because we have a set of conditioned responses, also known as processes, procedures, that we build up over time, either explicitly or implicitly, to change how results occur. So customer is screaming about a bug, goes to customer service screams at a developer fixes the bug, pushes to production, and hopes it works. Behavioral response. As the leader, we need to see that and decide if that's the most effective way. And eventually to work on that system so that our key three pieces, right? They know the work that needs to be done, they have the tools to do it, and they are voluntarily doing it excellently, all can occur. Bring back that model of the spheres real quick, because there's a challenge here. Only 2 out of those 3 can a leader, by default, directly influence. Number 1, we can definitely 100% of the time influence whether people know about the work that needs to be done. That's just communication. I sent him an email. That may not have been most effective, but I can definitely influence by telling them there's work to be done. I can make certain they have the tools by getting the licenses. Or if we can't get that tool, we have a process for working around that gap. But I can definitely do something to address that gap. That leaves us then with the one that's usually in the zone of concern and best we can influence, but or direct, right? We cannot compel a choice. And so that leaves the team pursuing excellence voluntarily in kind of a lurch. We cannot make them volunteer. We can voluntold someone, but that's not the same, and everybody knows it. In order for us to really build this, we're talking then about influencing people to want it. Why it is good for them to get it. This gets us into motivation, and we have to be very careful that it doesn't become manipulation. Because, yeah, certain choices have to have a stick. But that's not what moves people, right? People avoid stick. They pursue carrot. And we want them in the position of pursuing excellence by their own choice, not by compulsion. We want commitment. And so that means that we have to work on the areas we control to gradually build up over time our ability to pull the team's pursuit voluntarily up. That means we need to be a student of our people, right? To identify what motivates them. What makes for that great vision, that thing that's compelling for them will depend upon who we're leading and business results that are tied to those actions. Over time, we want to gradually influence that by maybe defining what excellence looks like and making it obvious that they can attain it. Maybe we want to associate rewards to those, but be careful, because what you reward, you will get more of. And you need to make certain that it's tied to the real outcomes the system has to produce, not merely outputs. But this is emerging from a leader doing the hard work to grow their influence, to work on the stuff that they can influence, the definitions of excellence, the tools that they need, listening to feedback and building the trust with the team so that they can influence eventually the thing that will make the system thrive. A leader aims to build effective systems, and it's through working on what the leader can already influence to change people. Remember all the way back at the beginning, right? Layer 3 work. You, that guy in the circle with the red arrow, are working on the flows of information, feedback loops. You're working on the flow of information with regard to knowing what work need be done and making certain that the tools are there and maintained and ready for the people doing the work so that the system, the team, produces the results that we crave. Remember, you're not going to rise to the level of your goal. You'll end up falling to the level of your system. And so if you're not getting the results you want, don't blame the players in there. Figure out why the system is hiccuping and not producing all of the beauty that you desire from it. And realize that it may come from working on the technical side. Maybe there really is a technical gap. Those would be easy problems. But maybe it's on the social side of that system, where the people aren't interacting well, or they don't know, or they're afraid. It will take longer to work on, but it is equally vital, if not more so, than the technology you use. An effective leader creates an effective team, because no matter how lofty their goal, it's only the system that's going to constrain them to what they can produce. Our work is that step back, not right up on the doing, writing the code or solving the problem or soldering the circuit, but in making certain that soldering guns are clean, that the solder is available, that the right circuits are available, that the right, and that we know the circuit we're supposed to be building and why. Our job is to fix the social circuitry in and around our team so that the system can produce the results we crave. But out of this, the goal of this talk has been hopefully to allow you to walk away with those characteristics that make for a great leader and being able to aim at that. So I want to take a minute here and A, check for any questions I haven't had the chance to cover. B, ask you to tell me, what are you taking away as a result of this talk today? What are the, hey, that was really useful? Because I'd love to know that. A, is feedback for this talk, but also so we can pollinate. Because it's not just me here trying to solve this problem. We're all working in these systems.
Okay, so I have another one for you. Great presentation, by the way, Daniel. Thank you. So Max Ekesi, I think I'm pronouncing it correctly, says, great theoretical approaches. Can you please share some real-life case studies that you have experienced, obviously without sharing company and people's names?
Sure. I'm not going to have a time for a ton of them, so tag me after if you want more, but I'll give you one that I think is a great example of how I need to address the social element of the problem. So this was while I was working on an e-commerce team, and we had just spun up this brand new team, but a pair of the developers would work, and they were like oil and water. They did not mix. They hated each other, fought like cats and dogs all the time. And I stepped up to be the scrum master in this team and was having a bear of a time trying to get these two to actually work together. Because the last thing a scrum team needs is silos, because people won't talk to each other. And it got to the point where I ended up asking the team lead, what on earth is up with these two? And found out that there was a genuine disagreement way back on some architecture with these two guys. Well, guy and a gal. And that ever since then, one of them who had felt disrespected was completely irked by this behavior. Finally got to the point where I had the conversation. It's like, hey, you're actively antagonizing your peer. I understand you don't like them, and that's okay. But is there anything we can do so that while we're in a meeting, you can talk respectfully in the way she will understand is respectful? Because there was a cultural challenge going on with this at the same time. To be honest, I got blown off. Okay, so what's the next step? Well, I relayed that information to the team lead and said, hey, look, we're probably not going to be able to get them to solve this problem because neither of them is willing to compromise. He's obviously super skilled and is super interested in this other project. And he mentions, for the benefit of the team, is it appropriate for us to talk about allowing him to go to that project and getting someone else to come in and play this role who's more willing to work with the players we've already got? Because it's this oil and water situation. Fast forward a month, and that's exactly what happened. He moved on and was much happier about a project he got to go work on. It was one of the hard technical problems. And the lady who stayed with us became infinitely more productive because she had people on the team who would actually talk with her about the stuff that was going on. And it was just down to negotiations. Hey, could you tweak it like this? Sure. But you had to talk with her in a way she understood was respectful. This is one of the easiest cases I have for the way the leader interacts is by solving the socio-technical problem, not just the technical problem. Now, that gets you kind of what you were looking there for, Max.
Thank you. Another one here. You mentioned that employees are 3.5, wow, that's a big number, more times likely to leave when leaders lack interpersonal skills. What would you recommend to leaders that excel in technical skills and knowledge, but struggle with their people skills? Where and how should they start?
Okay. So the first place to start is always admit that you have a problem. So good job. You've done the step number one. Step number two is once you've admitted that you have a problem, try and figure out where the gap is coming from. There are a couple of books I always recommend for this, but Crucial Conversations and especially Agile Conversations are great resources to start because they start in practical. Here's a tool, and they kind of build up the mindset that goes with the tool as you read through the book. Strongly recommend both of those as great resources to get started on. But the most important thing you can do as a leader once you realize you have a gap is get a mentor. Leadership, that transition is a new career. It is not a promotion. It is a mistake to think of it as. You will need to pursue entirely new skills to really be effective in this. And the best thing you can do then is get a senior leader whom you admire, whose results you have seen, if you can, coach you in this area. Someone who can come in and expect your results. But failing that, there are a number of groups like Vistage or several others where you can come and interact with other leaders in the space. Down here in Houston, the Agile Leadership Network also has an entry. Might be great to go and talk with them to find and get exposed to other leaders who are experiencing similar challenges and get coaching that way. Great question.
Thank you, Daniel. Those are some great insights. And Claudio La Sala from the audience says, quote unquote, team knows, team has the tools, team pursues excellence. My mind is framing that within James Clear's layers of behavior change, identity, process, outcome. I'm taking that for further reflection. Thank you.
Yep. And so the piece there that he's talking about there is that if you want to build real life change, you don't anchor it in some results you want to get at the end. You anchor it in a change in who you are. I don't want to lose 20 pounds. I want to be a healthier person. And out of that will emerge the new behaviors, but they'll be tied to something deeper than just, I want to lose 20 pounds. They'll be tied to, I'm actually this kind of person, and this is a vote for the kind of person I want to be in the future. In that sense with the team, if you can define layers of excellence, if you can define why do we exist and why is this work important, that's the way you anchor this new identity for the team to start knowing the work that needs to be done, having the tools and voluntarily pursuing excellence. That's what he's talking about. And it's a fantastic takeaway. Thank you, Claudio.
Thank you, Claudio. Daniel, I think we have time for another question. And here's one from the audience as well. You talked about accountability, which is one of the 13 trust behaviors, of course. Mm-hmm. This is difficult to do in an increasingly victimized society, the famous pointing finger syndrome. What can be done, in your own opinion, to be proactive regarding accountability?
Okay, so taking this then from the perspective of how do you be proactively accountable as a leader? The obvious option is to model it, right? The easiest sense is that, hey, when something goes wrong, how are you interacting with it, right? If I come in and say, all right, guys, who committed that code? Everyone's going to immediately go, not me, because I just made it a hot potato. But if I ask, hey, guys, do we know where that code came from? I'm not asking for blame. I'm asking, can you point me at the story for it? But you'll have to work with the team to kind of get where they understand this is safe. And that has to do with how you interact with every time there's that gap, that mistake, that oops, and how you end up presenting it in public. One of my favorite things to do as the consultant when I'm on a team and something goes wrong and I see the management going and playing the whose fault is it game, I'll raise my hand, my fault. Can we try and fix it? Because it sucks the air out of the scary of, well, if it's my fault, I'm going to get fired. The consultant just volunteered to jump on the grenade. But look for ways, right? Hey, I did a code review on that one, my fault. And encourage it to be the people who are the most senior, the ones with the most to contribute and give to the team, are the ones voluntarily stepping up and saying, it was not the junior's fault. We failed to lead them. You can do that on your own. volunteering to take on responsibilities that weren't yours. But the moment you volunteer to take something that's not yours, your leader above you, maybe, yeah, it's not your fault. And then you can echo back. So does it matter whose fault it is, or does it matter that we can fix it? But create the conversation, create the space for the conversation where it's understood we're no longer in this for blaming, and that blaming will not be the thing that carries the major consequences. Because sometimes, yes, repeated failures produces a need for a change. But we need to think about it like that, not a your head is going to roll unless it really is an orange jumpsuit problem. Create the conversation, create the space for it to be safe to talk. And that's, I think, the best way to start going about being proactive in this accountability. Take it yourself, volunteer, demonstrate, but it starts with you. Great question.
Thank you, Daniel. That was great. We don't have any more questions. I don't know if someone else from the audience wants to share their key takeaways from his presentation. We have time.
No, if not, I can go ahead and I'll give that summary back to one of the key questions I know I was asked earlier. And that was, what are the key pieces to becoming a great leader? Employees desperately want a leader worth following, and you can and should become one. One, start by being accountable. Become personally accountable for your own actions and start looking at the ways as a leader to be accountable for the results of your team. Know what is yours, know what is not yours, and don't panic when stuff goes wrong. Instead, take accountability, look for what you can influence, and go to work on fixing it. They want your leader, you as their leader, to be personally, and be able to see that you can make changes of you to grow and learn and get better, and that when you say something, you can be held to account that you will, in fact, get it done. They want to trust you. Trust comes from being personally effective. And lastly, of course, remember that your job as the leader is not just to be out in front, out calling the shots. No, your job is to build an effective system for the people doing layer one work to get everything they need and produce the results that the business desires. Build effective systems. Now, to help you along that journey, I want to recommend several books that are going to be critical resources for you going forward. Number one, I've mentioned this several times, Wiring the Winning Organization. This is where the 3 layers of work comes from. And it explores a new paradigm for leadership and management in the context of the organization. Gene Kim, Steven Spear with IT Press have done a great job. They deal with not only the theoretical models, but case studies so they can demonstrate this in all aspects of industry, military, pharmaceutical, energy, etc. All of these areas, they have a case study simplifying and demonstrating what the model looks like. Next up, of course, is 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. This is a foundation stone for personal effectiveness. And it will help you define and determine your worthy goal of the life you want to live and start building the processes to help get you there. Now, from the business side, I'd offer that Drucker's The Effective Executive, which was a seminal book on the definition of leading knowledge workers, he offers not merely effectual theories, but actually organizes the information and next actions so you can start figuring out how to take the ideas about system change and actually incorporate them into your organization and into your team in effective ways. But, of course, that all has to start with you being able to take personal accountability for the results your team is already producing, for the results your system is already getting. And so I will highly encourage you to also take a look at Extreme Ownership, written by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin, based upon their experience in leading the SEAL teams out in Iraq and Afghanistan. These men know their stuff, and they'll offer the stories, the case studies. What does this look like in the high-intensity environment of military combat, but also in the more approachable business area, and in understanding how these principles of effective leadership and taking extreme ownership actually apply. Lastly, I'd like to recommend to your attention James Clear's Atomic Habits, Tiny Changes, Remarkable Results. I don't know a better way to describe this book than his own words. It's about the building blocks of changing your behaviors and your habits into the future to create for yourself the kind of person and the kind of life you want to live. His patterns for behavior change apply not only to the individual, but at the team, provided you can understand the system impacting and influencing the team you're part of. But I want to offer one last resource that's going to come up pretty soon here. It's the talk that we have coming out next week, presented by Tonio Gaudiz and Lynn Barrett. A little tired from the talk. But Lynn and Tonio will be going through leading with This is going to start filling in some of the pieces that you need to think about as a leader of a team. What are the parts of the system you need to look into, and how do they play together? And I would encourage you to take a look at that. That QR code will send you directly to the Zoom link to get registered for next week's talk. And with that, thank you very much for attending. I hope you have all walked away with something good and useful, and that we will all become more effective leaders.
That was amazing, Daniel. Thank you very much. And finally, as we saw today, the key to becoming a successful leader is discipline and consistency of the right kind. But it is not a flat rule. Rather, like all human challenges, there is nuance with the pattern. That's all for today. And I want to thank you all for joining us, especially Daniel Schreiber for sharing his great presentation with all of us. And as he mentioned, coming up next week, we have another very good one, Leading with Agility with the amazing Lynn Barrett and Tanya Gladys. Until next time, everyone, have a great rest of your day. Thank you very much.